My name is Linda Leone, and I'm from Camosun College, and I work in the Early Learning and Care program. So this is starting at the beginning. We now have ample evidence, probably about at least 40 years of hard research that tells us that what children experience in the first 5 years of life sets a critical foundation for the entire life course. We have many studies that tell us that early childhood experience strongly influences basic learning, school success, economic participation, social citizenry, and health. And I'm thinking probably that many of you may have had a preschool or daycare experience as part of your early childhood. We also have a large body of research that shows that many challenges in adult society, such as eating disorders, heart disease, criminality, mental health, and competence in literacy and numeracy, have their roots in early childhood. Longitudinal studies have demonstrated how early learning programs are particularly important for families living in poverty, families living with children who have special needs, and families who are newcomers to our land. And these studies often cite early childhood programs as a recommendation. Neuro Scientists and now economists stand hand in hand with early childhood advocates for early learning and care programs. Neuroscientists have identified the first 5 years of life as the prime time for neural development, with 90% of the brain developed by the age of 2. We just keep adding on and losing those neurons after that. Economists tell us that based on the available evidence, an investment in early childhood is the most powerful investment a country can make, with returns many times over the amount of that original investment. For example, if this was stocks and bonds, we would have an early learning and care system in Canada. It saves that much money and over the life course of a human being, and that's not to mention the social factors involved. Canadian governments, both provincial and national, could make policies and implement a child care system based on this very powerful body of research. But our governments haven't done that yet. Canada does not have a system of publicly funded early learning and care. Canada has weak public policies and limited funding for early learning. And this has resulted in divisions between learning and care. The overall costs of these programs are inconsistent. Those of you who are parents and have had any kind of interaction with childcare, you already know the parent fees are high, and those fees do not cover the costs of good learning and care. Childcare spaces are sometimes very hard to find, and we know there are not enough qualified people to work in them. Well, while BC may own the podium, for many Olympic sports, we come in last in how much developed nations spend on our youngest children. Our early learning and care programs have been called Patchwork by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, and this is a worldwide organization, the OECD. And the OECD recommends countries spend at least 1% of their gross national product on regulated child care because this supports economic growth. Well, Canada spends 0.25%, a quarter of the lowest recommended amount on their children. This means that our early learning programs are predominantly market-based, they're ad hoc systems, and they're a provision of children's services that are sometimes in place or they're private arrangements. Environments set up for learning and caring that have qualified educators in them that are clean and safe are not assured with this kind of delivery system. So you may be wondering right now, I know a lot of people sometimes say, well, why don't we have one? If we've got all this research and all this good stuff is going on in early childhood, why don't we have a learning and care system for our youngest children? Some of the reasons are that funding is focused on specific services and subsidies. So this does leave the main cost to be covered by parent fees. There isn't a national system that guarantees spaces in legitimate and regulated centers. And we have a mishmash of public and privately owned centers with very well-intentioned educators, most of them with 2-year diplomas, doing their best to provide early learning and care for children. These people, though, are usually under-resourced and underpaid. BC has rolled out a publicly funded kindergarten program, and there is talk on the horizon for programs for 3 to 4-year-olds. And while this would seem to value early learning, we have separated the care from learning in this particular system. We're implying that care is not important through these funding mechanisms. This notion that care is not learning does not reflect the current research on brain growth. Children under age 5 need small group sizes. They need educators knowledgeable in this phase of life. We are fortunate, we're very fortunate in Canada. We have some very strong advocacy groups, and there's a strong movement in Canada to implement a child care system. Success by 6, the Canadian Child Care Federation, Child Care Coalition, the Human Early Learning Partnerships at UBC, and our own early years research unit here at UVic have many solutions, plans, possibilities, and recommendations on how to implement an early learning and care system in Canada. In fact, in BC, our early childhood educators of BC have presented this government here with ways to roll out a system for BC that is publicly funded that would probably take about 3 years to implement, and I can guarantee, I've seen the report, it won't cost us very much. We can have publicly funded systems of early learning and care that are affordable and accountable to taxpayers. These systems can be sensitive to families' traditions and first languages, and I know this for a fact. I've been teaching in early childhood as an educator of children and as an educator of adults for over 30 years, and we are ready. Our biggest barrier is lack of political will. And thank you for listening to me today.